Oh my goodness. See, this is what drives me crazy. Every semester, it's like, I have to try and be more patient. I have to calm down. I have to not worry so much. And I said, especially this semester, because, everyone's in the same situation. Everyone is finding their groups and finding. So I said, be patient. But God, I spend so much time putting things on Facebook and making Facebook pages and making blackboards. And I'm just like, can't they find them?
Yeah.
I think you guys found them very quickly, I think, anyway.
Yeah.
So I wonder why. Anyway, okay. I hope they show up this week. If anyone talks to them, they need to start coming to these sessions because if they're not, I'm going to take them off the list. Okay. I hate to make you guys the messengers, but if you feel like it, fine. If not, don't worry. Don't worry. All right. So back to the monkey's paw. We're going to have to close the door or something on him. Sorry, that's mine. The thing is, it's just about the time where my husband gets home from work to eat, and the dog just sits at the door and waits, and every little noise he hears, he runs out and barks, and so hopefully we can get him in here and get him quieted down. Um, we left off the monkey's paw in part one, and I had left for you for homework the description of Sergeant Major Morris. I don't see any videos. Can I see videos of you guys?
I am working on my camera.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's just so weird. As it is, it's weird to, talk to the machine. But when I don't see anybody else, it's like I feel like I'm going crazy. Maybe I am. Okay. Good. I'm glad to see. Chewy, it didn't help much. I can't see you.
Actually, I'm
All
sorry.
right. That's all right. That's all right. What does Sergeant Major Morris look like? What does he look like?
Well, he's tall.
Uh-huh.
Um, in my imagination, he's blonde.
Okay, well, the description here doesn't say anything about his hair color. Now, we can assume maybe, but nothing here that says it. But what does the text say? I mean, how the text gives us a very good description of him. What kind of description does it give?
That he is a sergeant.
Yeah, what else?
Um, that he has like muscles,
All
big
right.
muscles.
What word tells us that? What part of the description tells us that?
Um, the burly man.
Burly. All right. The word burly tells us he's big. He's well built. He's got muscles. He's strong. All right. You had already mentioned, Sam had already mentioned that he was tall. So he's tall, heavy built, strong, probably muscular, large. What else? All right. All right. Let me mention here before we continue. You need to come to class prepared. Everyone needs to come to class prepared. All right. I come to class prepared. I need you to come to class prepared. I might understand it if we had never looked at it, never talked about it. But as I said last class, I need you to make sure you read it well, you pull out the vocabulary you don't know, you look for that, right? We can't spend an hour and a half with a half an hour of silence because nobody's answering questions. Are we clear? All right. Who can tell me how else Sergeant Major Morris is? Tell me more about his appearance.
that he is also unfit.
Again,
He is also unfit
unfit? Why?
because that is well when he is talking about his stories. The well, Mr. White told him that like he is looking well.
Okay. But did you say unfit before that?
Yeah,
Or what word did you say? Because
that he
unfit and well are opposites. Opposites.
is fit, like
Okay.
with good body and yeah.
Well, I don't know because Mr. White does say that he's looking well, or Mrs. White, or one of them. But it's not necessarily that because he's fit, he has a good body, but because he's looking, even good for his age, because he's not a young man, right? We know that Sergeant Major Morris is not a young man. He and Mr. White met when the Sergeant Major was a young man. But for example, I might go to school and somebody says, "Oh, Marcia, you're looking well." I don't think they mean fit. But I appreciate the fact they say I look well, right? I look healthy, I look happy, I look, you know what I mean? Active, way to go. But they do say he looks well. But we have this description right here. We have this description. And the last thing I said to you at the end of last class was, what does it mean right here? Tall, burly man, beady of eye, and rubicund of visage. I said, what does that mean? That's for homework. The whole story is for homework. But there's a description. It's right there. Right? We don't even have to infer things. We don't have to say, well, I think maybe it's right there. I mean, he's tall, he's burly, he's beady of eye, and he's rubicund. What does that mean? That's the only thing I'm asking you. Okay. I'm not going to sit here in silence for an hour and a half. All right? When I ask you to prepare something for class, I'm very serious about you preparing something for class. I'm not going to sit here and wait for someone to talk and maybe 10 minutes later and 5 minutes later. And all right? The last thing I told you at that last class was this description. Last opportunity. Anyone? If not, I'm going to shut down the session and do some other work that I have to do. But this is going to waste an hour and a half to just sit in silence. Do you agree or not? There's no sense of us sitting here in silence while I'm waiting for you to give me an answer of something that's really simple and it's right there in your copies. Are you ready or are we not ready? Tell me. I'm going to take that silence as a not ready, all right? When we come to class, I'm going to admit 2 sessions for the same person. I don't know. Okay. You guys are just in time because I'm just about ready to cut this session short. Sylvia, can you save it?
Yes.
All right, I hope so, because no. This is not how we're going to start the semester. What did Sergeant Major Morris look like?
He is tall. He has big muscles. I tried to find the meaning of rubicund, but I got like the same.
The same what?
Like he was I don't know, pale, like he's
Again, he was what? Your microphone did something funny.
pale skin, like he was really white.
All right. Well, he
Um,
was white, but what?
he has like I found it here. He has like blotch in his face.
All right. All right. And that's what the rubicund means. Right? What about the
Yes.
beady eyes?
Mm,
What about the beady eyes?
I have it somewhere.
What does that mean? When somebody has beady eyes, what does that mean? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone?
That he has small eyes.
All right. They're small, yes, but there's something particular about the description of beady, and this is key to what's happening. Okay.
And it's eyes that seem to see with skepticism or malice.
Okay, I'm having a difficult time understanding, not because of the way you speak. I think it's because of the microphone. I can't distinguish the words.
Eyes that seem to see with skepticism.
Okay, skeptic? You think he's looking at things skeptically?
Or
It's not so much being a skeptic. It is the way, not the way he looks, but when you see someone with this kind of eye, there's something specific that you feel. Okay? When you see someone who has beady eyes, what do you feel about that person?
Like emptiness?
No? It's going to come into play much later on, not much later on. It's going to come into play in a little bit because, as you know, Sergeant Major Morris is the one who brings the monkey's paw into the White's house. Right? And what happens with the monkey's paw? Very squarely, the monkey's paw brings chaos and destruction and everything the monkey's paw does. Right? So how do you feel? How do you feel about Sergeant Major Morris visiting the Whites and bringing the monkey's paw? How do you feel?
I feel like he has a purpose to do with that, he said that he didn't want them to keep them, but he's still showing the monkey's paw and leave it there. Like he has a purpose to, besides that he said he don't.
Right, right. I mean, what was the purpose exactly? Why did he take the monkey's paw? He was telling stories, right? He was telling stories of India and all these mysterious magical beings and happenings. And he showed them the monkey's paw, all right? If he really didn't want them to have the monkey's paw, he wouldn't have given them the monkey's paw. So why?
Like pass the curse to another one?
Again?
Pass the curse to another one.
All right, but
get
why?
free.
But why? To be free from it? Does it help? Does it help Sergeant Major Morris to not have the monkey's paw anymore?
Maybe,
In
well,
one way, yes.
because he cannot use it again.
Can Sergeant Major Morris use it again?
No,
No.
Because
No.
he
He can't use
because
it.
he already had his three wishes.
Right. Right. He already had his 3 wishes. And does anything happen to the curse if he gives the monkey's paw away? I mean, for example, we learn that the monkey's paw did terrible things to Sergeant Major Morris's life. It did terrible things to the man before him who had his wishes. Does giving the monkey's paw to someone else reverse the wishes or help anything that was done before? No, Sergeant
No.
Major Morris does not benefit from giving the monkey's paw to Mr. White. Okay? But he lets them look at it. He throws it in the fire. And when Mr. White pulls it out, he says, "No, let it go. Let it burn. You're better off." And then at the end of and then the next thing you know, he is letting Mr. White keep the monkey's paw. Okay? So Sergeant Major Morris is bringing what to the house? He's bringing destruction. He's bringing chaos. He's bringing sadness. He's bringing through the monkey's paw. All right? Now, back to the beady eyes. Right? What does it mean when somebody has... How do you feel about Sergeant Major Morris? How do you feel about him?
Someone you
Traumatized.
can trust.
Again?
Someone that you can trust.
Right there. That's exactly it. Someone that you can't trust. And that's exactly what beady eyes means. You know what animal has beady eyes? A mouse, a snake. You know, these are animals that, you know, a cute puppy or a koala bear, they don't have beady eyes. They have these big puppy dog eyes, okay? But small eyes that are constantly like looking around and looking at you and making you feel uncomfortable. Those are beady eyes. And that's exactly the characteristic that the beady eyes needs to be transmitted to the whites and to us. Okay? Now, the whites, do the whites trust him? Do Mr. and Mrs. White and Herbert trust Sergeant Major Morris?
No,
They don't trust him?
no.
Yes and no, because they were like enough to believe their stories and everything, but they didn't believe in them when the sergeant says that it's better to leave it there and not use the paw.
Okay, but they trust him so much that they believe that the paw might have some kind of magic power. Okay, so do the whites trust Sergeant Major Morris? Yes, absolutely. They trust him completely. They're a little skeptical about if the monkey's paw works or not, but they believe enough to make the wish. All right, the first wish, and then the second wish, and then the third wish. So they believe enough to make the wishes. So they do trust him. Do you trust him?
Mm,
We know what happens. Do you
Yes.
trust him
At the end, no.
right now? 6.
Yeah.
Do you trust him now, Sergeant Major Morris?
Yes, because he is warming the Mr. White of the chaos that he could do by wishing something.
Okay, but when you see this, do you say, "Wow, Sergeant Major Morris is a really nice guy. I like him. He has the
So
best interest of the whites at heart"? Do you say that?
no, but he's
No.
warming.
But you say, "Oh, don't make the wish. Don't do it. Don't do it. Sergeant Major Morris, why? Why did you have to give them the monkey's paw? Mr. White, why did you keep the monkey's paw?" Okay, so part of it's Mr. White, I understand. But we as a reader, right, this is part of our foreshadowing. We as a reader should not trust Sergeant Major Morris because we know whatever he's bringing into the house right now is going to cause the downfall of the White family. Okay, that's foreshadowing. That's setting. So we know something bad is going to happen with this visitor. Why? It's dark, it's rainy, it's cold, it's terrible, they're isolated, and this person that only Mr. White knows is coming to visit him. All right? That's the setting for a horror movie. That's the kind of setting that Chucky would show up at your house at. That's the kind of setting where Michael Myers would show up at your house, where Leatherface would come to your house. All the great terror, Freddy Krueger. He never comes into your dreams on a bright sunny day. This is the kind of setting that all the great terror, monsters, villains would come into. And that's what we have right here. So the Whites trust him because Mr. White knows him and trusts him. Do we trust him? We shouldn't, because we know what's going to happen, right? Okay, and that's the description that they gave. Beady of eye and rubicund of visage. It means he has white skin but really red cheeks. And you've probably seen that kind of thing where they have, even like down here, it looks red because they're just so white. You can basically see all the blood in their face. But the beady of eye, right there, the author is telling us we cannot trust him. Whatever he's bringing to the Whites is going to be the end of them. Okay? That's why the description is important. Now, he introduced himself, Sergeant Major Morris. He took hands and, taking the proffered seat by the fire, watched contentedly as his host got out whiskey and tumblers and stood a small copper kettle on the fire. So they started drinking, basically. At the third glass, his eyes got brighter, and he began to talk the little family circle regarding with eager interest this visitor from distant parts. As he squared his broad shoulders in the chair and spoke of wild scenes and doughty deeds, of wars and plagues and strange peoples. All right? So he's telling stories. We know from last class that this is the time of Victorian England. This is the time where India became colony of Britain. This is the time where British troops were in India trying to keep it as their colony. And so he's probably visited many places that many people from Britain would never have even dreamed of. Okay. What happens? He's at the third glass. His eyes got brighter and he began to talk. Right? What do we see here?
He was already a little drunk.
Yeah. And we find that the more he drinks, the more stories he tells, the more he talks, the more information he gives. So that's going to be important a little bit later on. 21 years of it, said Mr. White, nodding at his wife and son. When he went away, he was a slip of a youth in the warehouse. Now look at him. Okay. 21 years of it. 21 years of what?
That he knows him.
That he knows him. He may have known him a little longer. We don't know. But 21 years of what? It says, when he went away, he was a slip of a youth in the warehouse. Now look at it. So 21 years of what?
Oh, that he went to the war?
Right. Right. That he entered the service. Because his title right now is Sergeant Major, which means he's got experience. He's got time in the Army. So 21 years of being in the military, many of those years probably in India and places like that. How do Mr. White and Sergeant Major Morris know each other? Now you really have to infer here. It doesn't tell you directly. You have to infer this information. But it's right here in this line.
They were friends like from when they were young and they were enlisted together.
So Sergeant Major Morris and Mr. White are the same age?
Mm.
Well, it says that he was about to, well, that's how I understand that he was about to be like still being young, like he was about to become an adult and don't be like a teenager anymore.
Who, the Sergeant Major?
Yes.
Yeah, well, when he went away from the warehouse, he was a youth, and now 21 years later, there's going to be a big difference in him, right? But that's exactly it. Where do Mr. White and Sergeant Major Morris know each other from?
From the warehouse.
The warehouse, all right? Now, what's the warehouse?
This place where you put things to keep them.
Right? But why is the warehouse important here? What is the warehouse here? What's the connection?
Mm,
21 years of it. When he went away, he was a slip of a youth in the warehouse. Now look at him. Mr. White and Sergeant Major Morris know each other from the warehouse. What can we assume? What can we infer about how they know each other?
that they work in there.
All right, that they were both working in the warehouse, right? But the one thing that we should notice right away is that there's going to be an age difference between Mr. White and Sergeant Major Morris. Now, Mr. White, as we'll assume during the story, is retired. Right? How old is Mr. White, do you think?
Like by that time, maybe 50, and I think that's much.
That's still young. 50 is still young to be retired. Yeah.
60.
Let's say 60, 70. Okay. Now, if Sergeant Major Morris was a youth in the warehouse, 16, 18, 21 years later, you know, Sergeant Major Morris right now is not over 40. So we do have an age difference between the two of them. Maybe Mr. White was his boss. Maybe Mr. White was his supervisor. We don't know for sure. But they know each other from working together in the warehouse. However, Morris was very young when he left and went off to war. Mr. White probably retired from the warehouse. So that gives us the relationship, the age difference, all this information between Mr. White and Morris. Okay. Now, Mrs. White says politely, he don't look to have taken much harm. And I like this, Chewy, because you said that they said he looked well.
Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting. She actually says he don't look to have taken much harm, which is kind of the negative way of saying you look well. Okay. Maybe someone says, you don't look very tired, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you look the opposite of it. So the idea that she's saying he doesn't look to have taken much harm, basically what she's saying is, he looks good. Imagine going off to war, living in India, being in the military for so long, spending so much time of his life in this. Not too bad. All right. I'd like to go to India myself, said the old man, just to look around a bit, you know. So this tells us that the stories that he was talking about was India. Better where you are, said the sergeant major, shaking his head. He put down the empty glass and, sighing slightly, shook it again. Now, if we look at foreshadowing, this is another place where we have foreshadowing. Mr. White says, I'd like to visit India. And Sergeant Major Morris says, better where you are. What does that tell us?
India is a dangerous country.
Again?
India is a dangerous country.
All right, a dangerous country. What else does it tell us?
It is not that good as he think about.
Right. All right. It's not as good as he would imagine it being. And we think, the funny thing is, when we think of India, we think of all the color and the glitz, but do we think of all the people in the transportation, all the people on the street, the garbage everywhere, the orphan children in the street? We don't think of the negative aspects, right? Okay. So he says, better where you are. Now, he shook the glass again, which is kind of a way of indicating, hey, my glass is empty. Yeah, do you hear my ice shaking there? My glass is empty. But they're not filling it quite yet. Right? I should like to see those old temples and fakirs and jugglers, said the old man. What was that you started telling me the other day about a monkey's paw or something, Morris? Dum! This is where, the red baby, 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 be careful sign comes on there.
But it's when you know why they make them to be drunk.
Well, yeah, exactly. You're going to see in a little bit that they keep filling up his glass because they want to learn more about it. Exactly. Okay. And of course, if they hadn't talked about the monkey's paw and Sergeant Major Morris had never come, then there'd be no story, because that's the whole thing, right? So we've got to get the story of the monkey's paw. We've got to get the monkey's paw in Mr. White's hand. We've got to do all of these things to make sure the story turns out. When you watch a horror film and you have a young girl who is babysitting the neighbor's children, all right? And so the children are asleep upstairs, and the babysitter's sitting on the couch, probably texting, watching a movie, something, and she hears a noise down in the basement. What does she do?
She had to go.
She goes to the basement door and she opens the door and she says,
Who's there?
right? Is someone there? Hello? Kind of thing. Why would you want someone to answer you? I don't know.
Oh, it's like, yeah, I'm not.
Yeah. I'm down here ready to kill you. Kind of thing. So yeah, from the time you hear the noise, if I were you, I would just kind of wait. Okay, no more noises. Okay, everything's fine. Wouldn't open the door. I'd lock it. I'd lock the door. Okay. So she opens the door. Hello? Anyone there? And she goes to turn the light on, but there's no light switch. Or the light switch, she turns it on, but no light turns on. The light switch is broken. What would you do?
Come back to the house.
Right? I'd leave the kids. I'd go back to my own house. Exactly. But she doesn't. She starts walking down the stairs. All right? So this is the difference of someone outside and someone inside. Does Mr. White see what's happening? No. Does Mrs. White see what's happening? No. Does Herbert see what's happening? Herbert sees a little more than Mr. and Mrs. White because of his skepticism. Okay? But we as the readers, we see what's happening. That's the big difference. You're going, no, I know what's going to happen. Don't do it. Oh my God. So we know they're going to get him drunk to talk. We know this monkey, it's called the monkey's paw. We know the monkey's paw is the problem. Right? And here's where it starts coming in. Now, what were you talking about, the monkey's paw or something? Nothing, said the soldier hastily. What does hastily mean?
Like very quickly. Like
Quickly.
no.
Exactly. Very quickly. Right? Nothing. Leastways, nothing worth hearing. Okay? And Mrs. White says, monkey's paw? What's that? Well, instead of Sergeant Major going, oh, no, no, there's no monkey's paw. No monkey's paw. He says, well, it's just a bit of what you might call magic, perhaps. But kind of, just a little bit of magic. Offhandedly, right? Very, oh, yeah, just a little bit of magic. Nothing important. All right? Why don't you just stop talking about it, Sergeant Major Morris? I don't understand. All right? His three listeners leaned forward eagerly. The visitor absent-mindedly put his empty glass to his lips, then set it down again. His host filled it for him again. Right?
Finally.
Mr. White, exactly. Finally, there's the empty glass. Mr. White says, the more I get into him, the more I get out of him. All right? The more alcohol we put in him, the more information he's going to give to us. So he fills his glass again. This is the best way to get a story. To look at it, said the sergeant major, fumbling in his pocket, is just an ordinary little paw dried out to a mummy. Now, here you're going to actually get to see the monkey's paw in the story anyway. All right? He took something out of his pocket and proffered it. Mrs. White drew back with a grimace, but her son, taking it, examined it curiously. Now, what did Mrs. White do? How did Mrs. White react?
Like,
Ooh, yeah. No, get it away from me, kind of thing. And what did Herbert do?
like
He's
watch
excited.
it
He wants to
carefully.
see it.
Yeah, Herbert took it and kind of went, okay. So we see this big difference between Mrs. White and Herbert here. Mrs. White wants nothing to do with this, and Herbert's going, I don't see any, magic kind of thing. We're going to get into that a little bit later there. Now, and what is there special about it? Inquired Mr. White as he took it from his son and, having examined it, placed it on the table. So Mr. White also took it, examined it curiously, and put it on the table. He wants to know more about it. It had a spell put on it by an old fakir. What's a fakir?
Is this
Like a kind of
Sylvia? Sylvia first?
this person from India that he works with the spiritual things, and that he is like a father in the church? Like he is believed that they have like this thing. They can be like the god, and they can manage things.
Okay.
I don't know if I explain it.
All right. Sam, do you want to add anything to that?
No, it was that because I asked to my dad what was that, and he told me that when he was living in Canada, there was kind of restaurants, Indian restaurants, and the person, people say don't go eat there because this person is a fakir, and he was like, what is that? And they started to explain that it's kind of a witch or a voodoo, something like that.
Okay.
It was like a direct connection with the gods and things like that.
Okay. That's interesting that like a whole business would be ruined because they think that they have this connection.
Anyone wanted to go to eat there because it was a fakir. And he was like, I don't care, I don't believe those stuff. So he go and eat there, but
right.
That's what he told me.
Okay. All right. And that's exactly it. A fakir is believed to have special powers to be able to create special connections. So the idea that this fakir would have put this curse on, well, a spell, I say it's a curse, a spell on the monkey's paw. We get the idea then that, yes, maybe something might happen from having this monkey's paw, making the wishes. Okay. A very holy man. He wanted to show that fate ruled people's lives and that those who interfered with it did so to their sorrow. He put a spell on it so that 3 separate men could each have 3 wishes from it. Okay? How many wishes did the monkey's paw give? I mean, how many wishes could the monkey's paw give?
3.
3.
3.
Are you sure about your answers? How many wishes could the monkey's paw give?
Well, three to each man. That is why, because the
All right, three
spell was on
wishes.
to each man.
3 wishes to 3 men. All right, so in total, the monkey's paw could give 9 wishes. 9 wishes. 3 wishes to 3 different men, 3 different people. Okay. He wanted to show that fate ruled people's lives, and those who interfered with it did so to their sorrow. Now, let me ask you a question here. When we look at history and legend and religion, where do we see the number 3? I mean, why 3 wishes? Why 3 men? Where do we see the number 3?
Like in Aladdin, with Aladdino, like with the genie, 3 wishes.
Well, yeah, that's 3 wishes again. Like the genie always gives 3 wishes, right? The same as the monkey's paw. But in history, in legend, in religion, where do we see the 3?
In the 3 wise men.
All right, the 3 wise men. Now, religion tells us that there was 3 wise men that went to see Jesus on the night he was born. Truthfully, they say that there were many more wise men that went to see him, but the church kept it at 3. Right? What other 3s?
In the Saint Trinity, like the Father, the Holy, and the Spirit.
Well, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Yeah. The Holy Trinity, you have 3 in 1. Okay. What other 3s? What other 3s do we have? She's not talking. You're not talking to us, are you? I see mouth moving. I didn't know if she thinks her microphone's on or not.
I think not. Wait.
I think she's talking to somebody else, but not quite aware. Okay. What other 3s?
Resurrection of Christ could be.
The resurrection of Christ. What
when,
3?
And when Jesus died, and after 3 days, he
Was resurrected. Yeah. Right? 3 days for the resurrection of Christ. What other 3s do we have with Christ?
When he was crucified, there were 2 thieves and him, so it was 3 crosses.
The 3 crosses. What else? Specifically with Christ.
He had 3 holes.
3 what?
Holes when he was like put on the cross, both hands and both feet like this.
Okay. He also had the one in his side.
Yeah.
All right. So technically 4. Yeah. Yeah. But there's more that have to do with Christ. Anyone? What time did he die?
When he was
33
years old.
When he was 33 years old? What time did he die? When he was on the cross?
3 p.m.
3 o'clock. Yeah. At 3 p.m. he expired. How old was he when he was presented in the church? Or when he was lost in the church, and therefore Mexican children have a special ceremony, or Mexican families have a special ceremony when a child turns how many years old?
3 years.
3 years old. Because Christ was in the church at that time. All right. What other 3s? From history, from legend, from folklore, from religion?
Friday.
Well, I would
Well, the 13th, that's a different story. That's a different story. Yeah, somebody else was going to say something?
Yeah, like I just can think now, like the three major gods from the Greeks. There are three:
Right.
Poseidon, Zeus, and
And
Hades.
Hades. Exactly. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, the three brothers, right? Sons of Cronus. What other threes? When you were a child, you probably heard some fairy tales. And those fairy tales included 3 bears, 3 little pigs, in my case, 3 billy goats gruff. Other threes?
The three major main monotheist religions.
Again, the 3 what religions?
The three main religions: Christianism, Judaism, and Muslim. Sufi.
Those are the 3 main religions? Based
And
on what? I'm not sure about that one because I'm not sure what it's based on. In other words, why Christianity, Judaism, and Muslim? Why those 3 religions? Because if we talk about main religions, I mean, you have more people practicing Hinduism or Buddhism
I mean
than,
monotheist.
again,
I guess.
Any other threes?
3 Musketeers.
The 3 Musketeers. Think about it, all right? Keep thinking about it. Because when we look throughout history, legend, folklore, religion, we see threes everywhere. You will never hear a story called the 4 Bears, right? Goldilocks and the 4 Bears, or the 5 Little Pigs. Why is it 3? It's all based on the mysticism behind the number 3. And that's exactly the same reason in the 1001 Arabian Nights, you have the idea of the genie of the lantern granting 3 wishes. Okay? So 3s are very mystical, mysterious, and related to magic. When you look at magic practices, you will see things done in forms of 3. 3, 6, 9, 12 times, 18 times, okay, because they're all variables of 3. So we have 3 wishes to 3 different people. Now, we're going to go back to this in a minute. His manners were so impressive that his hearers were conscious that their light laughter was jarred somewhat. What does that mean? Their light laughter was jarred.
That he was having like a normal laugh and then it changed.
Okay, it changed how?
Like, oh, Jesus, like what you're getting into.
What do you get? Yeah, exactly. That probably like fear or idea that, wait, what is all of this? How true, how serious can this be? Okay. Now, Herbert, who thinks he's so clever, says, well, why don't you have 3, sir? All right. You'll find that Herbert is our skeptic. He's the skeptic of this. So he wants to be smart. He wants to be funny. He says, if it can give 3 wishes, why don't you have 3? Because if someone gave you 3 wishes, what would they expect from you? Yes, exactly. To be rich, right? To ride around in a car, really fancy, with your new clothes and your watches and your rings and everything, and be like, your music playing in your car. So you would expect someone to be very rich. You would expect Sergeant Major Morris to ride in a Cadillac, you know, covered in gold, and that's what you would expect. So you would think if someone hadn't had wishes, or if they had wishes, they would be very different. But Herbert thinks, well, he hasn't had his wishes because apparently nothing has changed. Okay, so he says, why don't you have 3, sir? The soldier regarded him the way that middle ages want to regard presumptuous youth. What does that mean? What does that mean? The soldier regarded him the way that middle age is wont to regard presumptuous youth.
Like he looked at it like with a face like shut up or like no.
Like you're an idiot, right?
Yes.
That's exactly the way he's looking. He's looking at him like, what an idiot, you know? Where do you, pissant kid, get off telling me to have 3 wishes? What do you know? What kind of experience do you have? So Herbert is presumptuous youth, exactly. I have, he said quietly. His blotchy face whitened. And this is where you got the idea of the blotchiness, right? It's a blotchy red. You've probably seen people with very fair skin. When they run or do any kind of exercise or activity, their face gets all red. They get these blotches going on here. That's exactly what he is looking like at the beginning, but now even the red blotchiness is going white. White of fear, white of nervousness, okay? So he said, I have. And did you really have the 3 wishes granted? Asked Mr. White. No, Mrs. White, sorry. I did, said the sergeant major, and his glass tapped against his strong teeth. This is foreshadowing. All right, this is foreshadowing again. This is telling us that something is going to happen. Sergeant Major Morris is telling us his wishes were granted. What do we expect from Mr. and Mrs. White? Their wishes
To be true.
will also be granted, okay, if they have the monkey's paw. And has anybody else wished? Persisted the old lady. The first man had his 3 wishes, yes. I don't know what the first 2 were, but the 3rd was for death. That's how I got the paw. Stop the bus right there. This man brings in a monkey's paw. The first man, we have no idea what his wish is for. His first 2 wishes were for, but with his 3rd wish, he asked for death. Hello, are you awake? Are you there? What would you do?
You're gonna end that, or someone is going to end
If this were you,
with the same destiny.
if this were you, and you were sitting there with Sergeant Major Morris, what would you do right now?
Keep listening.
Up there.
Of course.
Keep listening. What would you do, Sylvia?
Like just stop there and like, okay, I don't want it.
You know what? I got to get up early tomorrow. All right, it was nice seeing you. Bye-bye. Have a good trip, kind of thing. Why would anyone? But this is it. We need this to happen. We need the wishes to continue on. But intelligent people like us, we would say, yeah, no, that's the end of it. However, what do you think? Which would win, your intelligence or your greed? Which would win, your intelligence or your greed? Which do you want more? To spend your whole life living safe and thinking about what would have happened, or making a wish?
I
Just
prefer to
thinking about
like
it.
what could happen, but
You
I
would-
know that I'm alive.
Okay, so you would be happy spending the rest of your life alive, but wondering what would have happened. Me too. I would have just
would
thought,
take the risk because, like, okay, he ended. He's not happy with the 3 wishes. I'm not experiment the same. No.
right, right. So right now we would be like, hold the phone, out. Sergeant Major, it was a lovely visit, but be gone with you kind of thing, right? But there's still more, right? There's still more. We know that the first man had his 3 wishes, and the last one was for death. We know that Sergeant Major Morris made his wishes. Later on, we get some more information about them. They ask, if you could have another 3 wishes, would you have them? And Sergeant Major Morris says, I don't know. I don't know. Right? So we know Sergeant Major Morris's wishes were not as bad as the first one, maybe? Right? Because he's doubting it. He's doubting it. Now, if you've had your 3 wishes, it's no good to you now then, Morris. What do you keep it for? And Morris says, fancy, I suppose. What does that mean? Fancy, I suppose.
Like,
Maybe like just to show it around.
Exactly, just as a whim. Just, because it's a nice key ring, okay? So be careful, because the word fancy, we know the other meaning, like, ooh, that looks fancy. And here, fancy is a whim. It's just something that you do because you enjoy doing it. Okay?
Like showing up.
Not so much showing off. Let's get some examples, okay? You know, Marsha, let's see, what do I have around here? You know, why do I keep a picture of my ex-boyfriend? Why do you keep a picture of your ex-boyfriend? What's the answer?
No.
Hmm?
I don't know.
You don't know. That's you should say fancy, I suppose.
Okay.
Just because, right? Just
Okay.
because maybe it's something that I don't want to relive, but I don't want to forget. You know, maybe I want to look at him and say, see what you're missing? See all of this? It's not yours anymore. Okay? So why do you keep a picture of your ex-boyfriend? Fancy, I suppose. Just don't want to throw it out.
Okay.
Okay? That's what it is. It's a whim. So this is where Sergeant Major, he takes the paw, he dangles it between his forefinger and his thumb, and suddenly he throws it on the fire. And Mr. White steps down and snatches it off the fire. Mr. White just put his hands in fire to get the monkey's paw. All right, so it's meaning something to him. It's meaning something to him there. Morris says, better let it burn. Mr. White says, if you don't want it, Morris, give it to me. Oh my gosh. You see this happening here and you're going, no. But we need this to happen in order to have the story. I won't, said his friend doggedly. I threw it on the fire. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Pitch it on the fire like a sensible man. Don't blame me for what happens. Dear God, Mr. White, throw the monkey's paw on the fire. All right. Does he? Does he throw it on the fire again?
No.
No.
He keeps it. Okay. Now, how do you do it? Hold it up in your right hand and wish aloud, said the sergeant major, but I warn you of the consequences. Right? And this is very interesting. When you hear these kind of stories, you really wonder how much research, how much goes into this. He says, hold it up in your right hand. Do you know what your right hand is for? In magic and mysticism, do you know what your right hand is for? What's your right hand for? Anybody know what your left hand is for?
It's for life. It's the hand of the life. When some witches, I don't know, read you your hand, I guess that they read you the life of your hand and the love, something like that.
Okay, that's part of it. Do they choose the right hand? Do they read your right hand?
They read them, both hands, but one is for life and one is for love, and they tell you when is you're gonna die. If your line is too short, you're
Mhm.
gonna die soon. But
Okay.
if the line of the life is long, you're gonna have
Mhm.
a
Okay,
long.
well, that's, sorry to interrupt. That's part of your hand, okay, here. But what is, how many of you have ever had your cards read? Your tarot cards? Have
No,
you ever
not yet.
had your cards read?
No.
All right. When you shuffle a tarot deck, you use both hands, obviously. But when you cut the deck, when you put it in different sections, you have to use your left hand because your left hand is the receptor. The left hand is for receiving. So you put the left hand, because you want to receive information from the cards.
Okay.
Right? When you flip the cards, you use your left hand because you're looking for information. So therefore, if the left hand is the receiver, the right hand is
The given.
the producer, right? The hand that does, that creates. And therefore, whenever if a witch would do a spell, they would use their right hand because that's what they're projecting out. The left is for bringing in, the right is for projecting out. So what's happening with the monkey's paw? What do you want? You want to project this. You hold it up in your right hand and you make your wish, which is basically your spell, your intention. Okay? Just a little bit of facts there, because it's interesting how many authors let these things slip. This is a man who never left London, right? But who learned all about magic and things. Hold up in your right hand and wish aloud, but I warn you of the consequences. I'm trying to think of the name of the movie, but I can't think of it. When somebody says, don't do this, and you say, I'm going to do it. And oh, I know, The Chocolate Factory. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And she goes, I want a goose that lays golden eggs. And he says, no, wait, don't, stop, don't go. Right? Because basically what he's saying, here's a goose that lays golden eggs. And she says, I'm going to go get the goose that lays golden eggs. He goes, no, wait, stop. Like, I warn you of the consequences. But whatever you do is fine with me, kind of thing. Here again, I warn you of the consequences. Don't do it. Be a sensible man. Let it burn on the fire. These are all the warnings that he's giving us. So Mrs. White says, sounds like the Arabian Nights, which is what we had mentioned, right? Stories of magic and mystical. She rose and began to set the supper. Don't you think you might wish for 4 pairs of hands for me? Okay. Her husband drew the talisman from his pocket, and all 3 burst into laughter as Sergeant Major Morris, with a look of alarm on his face, caught him by the arm. If you must wish for something sensible. Okay. Don't wish for 4 pairs of arms for your woman. Wish for something sensible. In your opinion, what is a sensible wish?
Help someone.
Something that you really need.
Okay, something that you really need. What were the other options?
Helping
Again,
someone.
hold on. Daniela, what was yours?
To help people or charity?
Again?
To help people or charity?
Okay, to help people or charity. Good. Sam, you had said the same thing, right? To help others?
Yeah.
Okay. So exactly, you say, I'm going to make some wishes that are not for me. They're not selfish wishes. They're selfless wishes. Okay. So I'm going to wish for others. I'm going to wish for something that we really need, right? If we need food on the table, I'm going to wish for food. If we need help with finances because we're going to lose our house, that's what I'm going to wish for. So you think, okay, I'll wish for something sensible. But even wishing for something sensible changes fate. So we've got to be careful with that. That's what we're looking at. So Mr. White puts it in his pocket. They go to the table, they eat supper. Afterwards, they're sitting around listening to more tales. So they've had supper. Now, after Sergeant Major Morris has left and they're closing the door, Herbert says, if the tale about the monkey's paw is not more truthful than those he has been telling us, we shan't make much out of it. Does Herbert believe? Does Herbert believe the monkey's paw has any kind of power?
Yes.
Kinda.
Okay. From what he says right here, he doesn't. From what he says, if the tale about the monkey's paw is not more truthful than those he has been telling us, we shan't make much of it. Meaning that everything he was telling us today was a lie. And the monkey's paw is probably a lie also. Did you give him anything for it, Father? Inquired Mrs. White. A trifle. How much did Mr. White give Sergeant Major Morris for the monkey's paw? How much did he give?
Like nothing with a lot of value.
Okay. All right. A trifle means he didn't give much. Okay. Now, how much is a trifle for a monkey's paw that will give you 3 wishes? How much is a trifle? $5, $10? Of course, in pounds, right? We're talking England. How much it would be a trifle? Because a trifle is something without value, is not very much. Okay? Mr. White says a trifle, and it says coloring slightly. What does that mean? He colored slightly.
That he said that the value maybe was more than it really is.
Right, the value is probably much more, especially if you can make wishes with it, right? But what does this mean? A trifle, said he, coloring slightly. This describes Mr. White. What happened to Mr. White when he said that?
Like lying?
How do we know he was lying?
Like because he wasn't like, it's okay, it doesn't matter. Like
It's because of that word, coloring. Coloring slightly. How do we know he's lying about what he gave?
Because he get nervous, could be.
How do we know he got nervous?
His chest could.
The color of his face changed, right? The color of his face changed. He was blushing. That's what that means, coloring slightly. Means that he was blushing. The color of his face changed. He got a little redder because he was probably lying about how much he gave. A trifle. He probably gave more than that. And he was a little bit ashamed. Why would he be ashamed?
Because that was not the truth.
Because again?
That wasn't the truth.
Okay, because it wasn't the truth. But there's more than that. There's more than that. Why would he be ashamed? Why would he be ashamed of giving money for a monkey's paw?
Because if you think it like rationally, it's really stupid.
Right? Buying this dried up little old monkey's paw, it's stupid to spend money on that rationally. Okay? So the fact that he gave him money and he wanted to keep the paw makes us see that Mr. White, in some place in him, he believes. He believes that the paw has powers. All right? Let's remember this, because Mr. White, Mrs. White, and Herbert now have this thing where they believe, but they don't want to believe, but they're ashamed that they believe, but he doesn't believe, but he maybe believes a little bit. So it's this whole thing here where do they believe or do they not believe? Okay, or they believe, but they don't want to let people know that they believe because they're embarrassed by it. Now, he didn't want it, but I made him take it. And he pressed me again to throw it away. So again, Sergeant Major Morris said, you should throw that away. You know, here's Sergeant Major Morris accepting the money that he gives, but saying you should throw it away. All right, contradiction here again. Now, likely, said Herbert with pretended horror. Why, we're going to be rich and famous and happy. Wish to be an emperor, father, to begin with. Then you can't be henpecked. Right? What does the word henpecked mean?
Like nobody can tell him what to do. Like he is the one that he's going to be like the boss.
Okay. And who would normally be the one to tell him what to do? When we use the word henpecked, that's exactly it. Nobody can tell us what to do. But henpecked specifically is talking about one person telling him what to do. Who?
Mr. White.
Mrs. White.
His wife?
Exactly, Mrs. White. So the hen, Mrs. White is the hen, right? Mr. White's the rooster. Mrs. White's the hen of that nest. And so he can't be henpecked by his wife. She can't tell him what to do. He darted around the table, pursued by the maligned Mrs. White, armed with an antimacassar. Now, we see this relationship between Herbert and Mrs. White. Remember at the beginning of the story, what did we see between Herbert and Mrs. White?
Complicity?
Right, right. We saw complicity between them. We saw them both kind of going and attacking Mr. White, right? Or making a little joke about Mr. White. And here we have the same idea. Mrs. White runs around the table after Herbert because Herbert's saying that Mrs. White henpecks Mr. White. And so she's like, kind of thing. So we see this playful relationship, this complicity, this conspiracy between them, and this is what's going to cause a lot of problems later on. Now, Mr. White took the paw from his pocket, eyed it dubiously. What does dubiously mean?
Like questionable? Like
questionable? Doubting, exactly. The word dubious means doubtful, full of doubt. Okay, so he looks at it doubtingly and he says, I don't know what to wish for, and that's a fact. It seems to me I've got all I want. What do you think? Should they stop the story there? Yes. Mr. White, you have everything that you want. Don't make the wish. Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay. Now, if you only cleared the house, you'd be quite happy, wouldn't you? Said Herbert, with his hand on his shoulder. Well, wish for 200 pounds then. That'll just do it. What does that mean? If you only cleared the house, you'd be quite happy. Why 200 pounds? Why 200 pounds? To pay what?
The house.
The house, exactly. He still owes on the house. He probably has a mortgage or a loan for the house. So what Herbert is saying, well, 200 pounds. You'll be able to pay the house, right? Not too much, not too little. It's perfect. Great. So his father smiling shamefacedly. What's shamefacedly?
like regretting or saying like
not regretting so much, but shame. You see the word shame in there, right? Shamefacedly. He's embarrassed still. He's embarrassed because he's about to make the wish. Okay. He held up the talisman as his son, with a solemn face, somewhat marred by a wink at his mother. A wink at his mother. There is the complicity again between Herbert and Mrs. White. Sat down and struck a few impressive chords. What did Herbert do right there? What did Herbert do?
Play the piano.
Yeah, he sat down at the piano Yeah, he sat down at the piano and probably went like dun 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 kind of thing to create this atmosphere of going to make a wish with the monkey's paw. All right. I wish for 200 pounds, said the old man distinctly. A fine crash from the piano greeted his words, interrupted by a shuddering cry from the old man. His wife and son ran towards him. What did Mr. White do as he made his wish? What did he do? He made his wish. I wish for 200 pounds. Then what did he do?
He threw the paw.
All right. And
Screamed.
screamed. Exactly. This is important because we see here he cried. He cried. Cry here, scream. All right. Not always, but in this case, meaning that he screamed. What did the monkey's paw do?
It's moved.
It moved. It moved in his hand. As he made the wish, he felt the monkey's paw moved. It twisted in my hand like a snake. All right. His son picked it up and put it on the table and said, well, I don't see the money, and I bet I never shall. So they think that as soon as they make the wish, they're going to see the money fall from the ceiling or appear out of nowhere, right? It must have been your fancy, Father. It must have been your imagination. Okay. He shook his head. Never mind. There's no harm done. But it gave me a shock all the same. So right now, they think that the monkey's paw didn't work. They think everything is going to continue on normally. They think no harm, no foul, right? Yeah, it's not until the next part where they actually do. So Herbert says, I expect you'll find the cash tied up in a bag in the middle of your bed. Mr. and Mrs. White, are going to go to sleep. And Herbert is sitting alone in the darkness, finishing his drink, looking at the last embers of the fire. What happens to him? What happens to him? Herbert stays down in the parlor. He's watching the fire as it goes out. Mr. and Mrs. White went on up to bed. What happens to Herbert?
He was
starts-
watching the fire, but he was like seeing faces.
What kind of faces? What kind of faces? Seeing faces in it. The last was so horrible and so
Simian.
simian.
It's
Right? The last was so horrible and so simian that he gazed at it. He was seeing a monkey's face in the fire itself. Okay? It got so vivid that with an uneasy laugh, he felt on the table for a glass containing a little water to throw over it. His hand grasped monkey's paw, and with a little shiver, he wiped his hand on his coat and went up to bed. Right? What just happened to Herbert and what happened to us? Herbert does not believe in any of this. What just happened?
He was cursed.
Well, that's what we're going to find, right? He's the one that was chosen for what's going to happen next. And the idea that the person who believed the least right now believes the most, because he doesn't believe completely, but he knows he's seeing something here that is not just his imagination. Okay? And this is foreshadowing for us. Who is going to be the victim of the monkey's paw?
Herbert.
Herbert. Right here it tells us. And not Mr. and Mrs. White. Mr. and Mrs. White indirectly, but Herbert is going to be the one who gets them the money. We know that now from this part. Okay. I put on Facebook a sheet with the elements of fiction. Okay. Take a look at it. draw it in your notebook so that you have it there, print yourself out a copy, whatever you want to do. But we're going to work on that a little bit because what we're going to do is start looking at the setting, at the character, at the plots, who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist, all these elements in each story that we look at. Okay? So we're going to be using that for next class. And for next class, we'll take a look. We'll start with part 2. All right? Any questions? I put the calendar up on Facebook too of what we'd be doing. Okay. But in order to keep the calendar, in order to keep the schedule, I insist you need to come prepared. Right? Look up the vocabulary you don't know. It will be on your exams. Okay? Make sure you understand what everyone's doing and what things are meaning. Find out the examples of foreshadowing, things that let us know what's going to happen later on in the story. Okay? Actually work with the story. Don't just say, oh yeah, I'll sit there and read along with Marcia, because this is going to be the only time that we look at it part by part. The others will not be done in the same way. All right? Any questions? No? All right, I'll see you on Wednesday then. Have a great one.
Teacher, did you
Thank
pass
you.
the list?
Again, question?
Did you pass the list?
Yes, I did.
Can I check with you? I'm enter una y 10. My name is Morales Ahumada. If you
I know. Look, listen, hold on. I know exactly who you are.
Oh, thank you.
No, that's not a compliment. All right. I know exactly who you are because when I take the time to put things on Blackboard, on Zoom, on Facebook, and then in Facebook and notify and emails of everyone who's in CK, notify them, and then what happens? I look in Facebook and I see everyone go, ¿quién sabe qué onda con el maestro? Y tal maestro esto, y tal maestro no lo encuentro, y quién sabe qué. And listen, don't interrupt me, listen. And then I'm saying, I'm so happy because everyone knows exactly where to find me. And no students, one thing that makes me very happy is that no students are going, ¿qué onda? ¿Quién sabe de Marcia? ¿Y qué pasa con las clases de Marcia? Because I'm there. Okay? I'm there. That bothers me because I look at the other teachers and I'm like, oh, what terrible teachers. They haven't notified their students. And then my name appears there. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Look for things before you start. Marcia. No.
Okay.
You understand that?
Yes.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Get there on time, get in class on time, get in the session.
Yes.
All right. And don't talk to other people while you're in class during the entire class because I see your mouth move with no volume and figure that you're not talking to us. All right. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see ya.
Thank you. Bye.
I'll see you in the next class, teacher.
Yeah.